Here are 5 reasons SuperPlate from Soundtoys is an absolute game changer for plate reverbs. You get 5 analog plate styles, including the E-Plate 3, Gold Foil 240, Audicon, Stocktronics, and the Classic 140. You get an additional 3 preamp options. You've got the tube, solid state, or clean. The decay ducking option is an absolute must-have once you've used it for the first time. Instead of ducking by using volume automation, it actually reduces the decay time in real time once the signal has crossed the threshold. It is amazing and sounds phenomenal. The modulation controls really add realism to the reverb sound, and the new stereo width control really pushes things out to the left and the right, also using modulation, but really transforms an otherwise mono signal into what sounds like just beautiful stereo space. So we're going to talk about all that and more coming up in this video. Stick around to check out SuperPlate, the brand new plugin from Soundtoys.
When you broke me first, I've learned to handle my...
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into checking out this incredible plugin. I will leave chapter notes just in case you want to skip to any one section, but the first one we're going to start with are those incredible plate algorithms. So you can see here we've got the Classic 104, the Gold Foil 240 Audicon, the E-Plate 3, and the Stocktronics. So I've got this on a vocal right now.
What can I do with silence?
And I'm going to come into the tweak page and just turn off that threshold for a minute. That's the auto-decay feature I mentioned in the beginning. It is phenomenal. We'll get there though. And what I'm going to do is, the mix is up 100%. I'm going to go ahead and just bypass the EQ. It's got a little bypass button over here. And I'm going to crank the send up and mute the vocal. So I'm just going to go ahead and solo this particular SuperPlate. So now we're just going to be able to hear the reverb tail without the dry signal at all. And I'm going to flip through the different algorithms quickly so you can hear the different flavors. And then I'm going to go through them a little bit slower with messing with some of the preamp options as well.
What can I do with silence? 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 What can I do with silence?
So very distinct flavors for each one of those, and I love that. Some of them have a brighter high end, others are more subdued, and there's just a lot of different characteristics that are different between the 5, which makes it incredibly powerful. Switch of the button, different plate reverb, phenomenal. All right, so now let's check out the different preamp flavors. Now, it's important, if you're gonna get the full effect of these, you wanna make sure your input is up really high and the SuperPlate is getting enough signal to kind of overload it, which is where your saturation and distortion come from. So I got my input volume up to max here, and you can really hear it. So we got a tube, we got a solid state, and then we have a clean. And you can see there, even with the input volume up at max, I mean, it's not really pushing the limit, but it is completely clean. While I think the tube might be my favorite. So let's go ahead, while knowing that, and cycle through the different flavors again and just see what the differences are. And I'm going to skip clean because, well, it's clean. All right, so there we go. Those are the different preamps with the different reverb types. Now, obviously, we've got it just on a vocal right now. I am going to throw it on some music in a minute, but this is just a quick run through of what this is capable of and to give you a general profile. All right, so now that we've checked it out on a vocal, let's check it out on some musical elements. This does have a bass in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the output EQ on, but I'm going to have it around 100 hertz. And I am going to turn the auto-decay feature off. Modulation, I'm just going to leave as is, but I am going to flip through the different flavors here of plate reverbs and the different preamps. I do have the input level up pretty high. And I'm going to go ahead and solo SuperPlate. All right, so while I did that, Audicon is 100% the one I want on this particular instrumental that I have here. So let's go ahead and mix that in now. Let's pull back in the auto-decay. Let's bypass it. Dude, it sounds so good. It sounds so good, especially with those preamps, giving a little bit of that character and color on the top end. From there, what we can do is it still has the infinity reverb, which is very, very fun for making sort of reverb beds that you can use like a pad. It now has a pre-delay, which is very, very handy when you're adding reverb or small bits of plate delay to something like a percussion. And it does have a modulation control. We can go from 0 to 100% modulation. Just going to add a little bit of fluctuation in terms of the reverb instead of it having being super linear. And it's just going to add essentially realism to it, because reverb in the wild is not linear usually. And then you have a modulation rate down here at the bottom, which these just work together in tandem. And then we have a low and a high cut, but the EQ has to be on for those to work, and you'll see that we can either move them down here and we can even change the slope. Phenomenal. Just in general, I'm probably going to have this around 100, and it's great that I have a frequency markings down here so I know where about 100 is. And we also have 2 additional bell filter nodes, so we can do a little bit of a boost and a cut where it might be muddy and really start to shape our reverb just with that filter, which is, again, phenomenal. Again, probably too loud on the reverb, and I'm going to pull down the send and begin to mix in the vocal as well.
Walking night to a silence that left in my house again. When you broke me first, I've learned to.
And just a good note, the Q value of each one of these nodes, I'm adjusting it with the wheel of my mouse. Also, if you want to put it back, any one of these parameters to its initial state, if you hold Alt and click, it will go back.
Walking night to a silence that left in my house again. When you broke me first, I've learned to handle my pain so well.
All right, so there you go. That's the basics of the filter, the modulation, and the different reverb algorithms. But now we're going to talk about this auto-decay feature. Now, this works differently than most other reverb plugins that I've ever seen, and I've seen a ton of reverb plugins. Usually, there's an auto-ducking feature. Now, that auto-ducking feature is going to push reverb out of the way by reducing the volume of the reverb tail. But this, instead of using volume, actually reduces the decay time in real time of the reverb itself. So it's getting a completely different effect. And trust me, it sounds really, really great. Instead of leaving it, well, actually, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on, the vocal.
Walking night to a silence that left in my.
You can see that when the threshold is crossed, which is adjusted here, you can see where the reduction goes to, and you can set the target of reduction over here. So depending on how much you want the decay time to slow or reduce, you set that with the target there. And then the recovery is how quickly it will go back to the state you had it at the beginning. So almost like a release.
Walking night to a silence that left in my house again. When you broke me.
It's very, very cool. So I've got it on a vocal right now, but let's head over to where I have it on some instrumental bits. All right, so let's come into the tweak page and mess with this auto ducking. You can see that I've got the reverb up pretty high, over 8 seconds of reverb tail, but because that auto decay feature is really triggering every time essentially a sound comes in, it's keeping it really, really clean. Let's go ahead and bypass the auto decay and see what it would sound like otherwise. You can just hear that the long tail, especially in the lower end, is just washing over everything. But when we include the auto decay, now I'm going to bring up the reverb a lot more than I would in a real case scenario, just so you can really hear what's happening here. That is a massive reverb tail being shortened every time essentially a sound happens, and this is about as clean as you're going to get. And the last thing just to point out here is there is a width control. Let me jump back into the vocal so you can really hear this.
What can I do with silence?
So that's the width at 100%. Again, it's just using subtle modulation on the left and the right channels to give you the scope of stereo space.
What can I do with silence?
That's mono. That's how a plate reverb usually would be.
What can I do with silence that left in my house again? When you broke me first, I've learned to handle my pain so well. I have no choice, so to make me choose everything I had, I have to lose. My last wish to stay for a second before you leave me only echo.
All right, so there you go. There's a rough and tumble introduction to SuperPlate. Phenomenal reverb. If you can, grab it. LittlePlate, sorry, you're out. SuperPlate is in. If you have any questions, put them in the comments and I will get back to each and every one of you. And hopefully I'm going to get Soundtoys on a live stream to give us the expert insight into everything about this plugin because I love it. Anyway, as usual, I'm Joshua Casper. I hope you learned something and I'll see you in the next video.